Well, it doesn't technically. I mean, you already gave consent by giving the interview, but like I said, I'll promise to keep it in context. I may or may not include that. I'm just being honest.
Okay, so here's one option at this point.
Okay.
This camera comes with me.
What?
Yeah. I got 7 people standing around here right now. Yeah, unless you agree to process this interview, there's one of them.
Don't let him swindle you.
Me?
He's trying to take your camera.
The condition.
Well, dude, that's
for
fucked
you
up, man.
posting
I'm telling you, I'll put you in context. I'm keeping everything honest, but you're like threatening me to take my property now. What's up, guys? NuanceBro checking in. We're here in San Francisco, California at the Families Belong Together rally. Let's go talk to people, see what's going on. So why are we out here today?
We're out here because we're really upset about this, the immigration fiasco that's taking place mainly along the border, but throughout the country.
And what's going on exactly?
What's going on is that people are being detained, many of them seeking asylum, and are not just being, first of all, they were separating the children, which is just absolutely outrageous. And now they're presumably not doing that, although many children remain in unknown places and parents in unknown places, and little hope of reuniting those. Yeah, but even the indefinite detention, which the administration is proposing as a solution, keeping families together, but for some indefinite.
Is it indefinite though?
Yes, that's what it said.
Isn't it until like their expedited trial process goes through?
It would be until, yes. I think that's what's indefinite about it.
I think they're trying to do it within the 20 days to comply with the Flores decision, right?
I believe there's no chance of that.
Well, they're trying. I mean, obviously there's limited resources. They can't right now, but I think they're trying to, right?
That's very nice of you to give them that benefit. I personally am not impressed, and it's sort of like everything that comes along is crazier and more offensive, basically, to a fundamental human spirit of decency and kindness.
So what do you think should be done, like in light of this crisis?
I think that the Congress, probably in particular, needs to really try to make some coherent policy about immigration. Really try. And I mean, I personally believe that the GOP, half of Congress at least, is incapable, basically, of doing that. Of careful focus on a real problem. It is a real problem. I mean, I firmly believe that we have to be able to control our borders. Otherwise, population is out of control, and we can't function in the world. The whole world has to come to terms with this. But the way it's being done now under this administration is scary, and it is hurting people, many people, in very deep ways. This showing here today, by the way, is just a handful of folks, because next weekend is the big demonstration here in San Francisco, and actually across, June 30th. And this was organized before that, and then Gay Pride, and so it's diminished by that. But
so what did you think about Chuck Schumer's comments, where you said Congress should do something, but he said no, like the focus should be on Trump and his actions, not Congress. Like, this isn't really.
I don't go with that. I in many things agree with Chuck Schumer. Other things I don't agree with Chuck Schumer.
So do you think they should come together and actually try to buy?
I think that Congress, this pain will continue until there's a coherent policy in this country. And part of what we're seeing with this activity at the border, the disgusting stuff, it results from a lack of that policy being developed over the past 10 or 20 years, however long it's been perceived as a problem.
But what do you think the specific policy should be that Congress should pass? I mean,
I don't have any sense of that, but I think it has to grant real refugees from terroristic situations abroad to at least apply to get into this country for asylum.
And like, what percentage of the people that are coming here right now, for example, like the ones being detained and all that, who are claiming asylum, what percentage do you think have like legitimate asylum cases?
I have no idea. It's always important to remember that a large part of the responsibility for the disaster that Central America has turned into, that's overstatement, but the difficulties that are present in Central America have to do with our country's policies there over the years. The death squads, the training, the military leaders at the School for the Americas in Georgia, just really unhelpful. Also from corporate invasion.
Corporate invasion.
An invasion of local economies by large corporations that are so large they have their way.
Do you feel like that's a net negative for those countries as far as like the job opportunities that come for them as well?
It's a good question, and that could be argued, but certainly our country has been cavalier in how we have approached the world in general, and in not being responsible ourselves for our end of so many things.
So why are we out here today?
Well, my understanding is that 2,342 kids are effectively missing. We don't know where they are. We don't know how to get them back to their parents. And I'm tired of this shit. It's a poorly thought out policy followed by chaos and incompetence. And I think a lot of people are fed up.
Sure. I mean, so those kids, I believe those are the ones who actually came here by themselves, the ones who were lost. They were...
See, this is part of the chaos as well. I'm hearing mixed reports on that, but none that are so mixed that there isn't a grain of clarity in all of this. What winds up happening, on my understanding here, is that once parents get pulled from kids, the kids become unaccompanied minors and get reclassified accordingly. So this is not unaccompanied minors.
I was told it was. I'm pretty sure it is.
We should check on that.
Sure.
Because my understanding is that these are unaccompanied minors, if they are, on account of their parents being stripped from them.
So as far as the, you have this other part of this sign which says nation states are for assholes.
Yeah.
What's the point? What does that mean?
It's an old Frank Zappa reference.
So I mean, what does it mean?
It comes from a Frank Zappa song where the lyric says, "Broken hearts are for assholes."
What is it? I still don't understand like the meaning behind it.
Well, let's just ask the question because this was the sign that drew you here for the interview.
Yes.
So what was it about this that for you said, we should talk to this person about this
It seems like a pretty provocative statement, I would guess. And it seems very counter to what most people, I feel like, believe in the world. Do you agree or disagree with that kind of sort of statement?
My inclination is to think that Borders was a 90s bookstore. I don't mean that the nation state is completely dead, but it's increasingly being overrun by transnational flows of capital and culture. And I read many of the elections in Western democracies recently as reactions to what we might just call global capitalism. And the dilemma now is that now it's not only capital and culture that are flowing across borders, but the bodies that are byproducts of the capitalist machinery that produces global wealth.
So I'm confused. Do you find that a good thing or a bad thing?
It depends. Some days I think this is actually a good thing because this is what needs to happen. I think that the wealthy post-industrial elites need to see the effects of their foreign policies as well as their business transactions. And part of that is the bodies that show up and say, sometimes even washing up, saying, we can't live in the world that you've left us with.
So as far as the biggest reason for why you're here, would you say that, the 2,300 number as far as the ones that are unaccounted for, would that be like the top reason, top three, or what would you say?
I wouldn't say that at all. The reason why I'm here is this little girl over here who's 3.5 years old. And I want her to see that if she sees something in the world that she finds frustrating, that she wants to learn more about, that there are still places she can go other than the internet to figure this out.
So under the Obama administration, they lost, I think, over 4,000 children under these same sort of circumstances. Did you come out and protest when that happened?
I actually wasn't aware of that.
I mean, like, you mean you weren't aware of it back then, or you just now?
No, I wasn't aware of that back then.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think that's a failure of the media and how they get out information and this idea that, sometimes they criticize certain people more than others?
Actually, no. I think this is actually this is a huge dilemma, because this tends to split very cleanly along your T-shirt, and I take your T-shirt to be fairly important in this regard. This is not a Democrat or Republican yeah, if you wanted to see what, yeah, the T-shirt's great for this. No, I think this is a systemic issue, and I think the bullshit about getting into whether this is a Republican issue, or because the implicit in your question is, are we just going after certain people and letting others slip by the wayside? I think that's a huge failure. I regret that I didn't have that information about Obama. I don't fancy myself on either side of the so-called
Not a partisan.
aisle. Yeah, not partisan in that way. That's a way simple operation, politically speaking. I think the more difficult challenge is to actually think through what media channels are giving us information, where the information is coming from. I mean, to put this briefly, I think the dilemma right now is one of information literacy. We face a glut of details coming through. And the trick for me is, how do you wade through all this and figure out what's a viable source, what's something worth acting on, what's worth coming out for?
It's tough. I mean, you have to read a lot of sources and cross-reference and stuff like that to find any sort of semblance of truth. Otherwise, a lot of people, they go to imright.com and they try to, confirm their own sort of biases and things like that. But getting back to the topic, obviously there's a crisis going on. What kind of policy do you think should be in place to kind of, what do you think should happen going forward?
With what crisis exactly?
The migrant crisis.
I don't know any sort of a global solution here, so to speak, but I think there are some things that I've heard floated that sound like good ideas to me. For instance, the way the previous Bush administration actually went to the countries that are supplying broken infrastructure, broken economies, broken political police systems, and as a result, citizens that are abandoning in order to come here. I think we need to go to those countries and do a much more robust information campaign. If our borders are closed, people down there need to know that. And as near as I can tell, that hasn't been happening.
You don't think they know that the borders it's not legal to cross the border?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. What I'm suggesting is that the zero tolerance policy needs to be widely advertised if indeed that's going to be U.S. policy. And I don't think that's what's happening. I think they're relying on some sort of social media circuit and news outlets to kind of lead the charge on informing the bodies who are hurt and who are trying to come here as a result. And as a result of this, I don't think that we have a government that is thinking through this. I don't want to say that our current government is just evil and they just don't care about these individuals and are like, forget it. The more bodies that come here, the more able we are to make our argument for identity politics in the United States and push a nationalist agenda. Oh wait, let me rephrase. And push a nationalist agenda, because if we can show that we're overrun or present the illusion that this is some huge dilemma, then as a result we can talk our way into an ethno-nationalist state where suddenly the reason why we need to hang together and put up walls and so forth is because we have all these individuals coming to us. My point here is that I think the U.S. government at this point, this administration, actually has a good stake in keeping information flows to the countries that are producing these migrants down. Because the fewer people hear about this from bona fide sources, the more likely we are to have more bodies coming here, and that in turn.
You think it's kind of like a conspiracy? Like the Trump administration almost wants them to come here to say this is a problem, so they can, build the wall instead of just getting the information out there that, hey, we're going to have a zero tolerance policy and just have less people come overall.
I think the operative word in your sentence is almost. I don't think this is a conspiracy theory. I think this is actually a function of bureaucratic state apparatus, where we're not being ruled by one person. We're not being ruled by many. This isn't a democracy, and it's certainly not a monarchy. It's a bureaucracy, which means rule by no one. I think actually that this is not a consciously thought through thing. I think this is a byproduct of bureaucracy.
Some people say oligarchy.
I think that's a very nice way to think of bureaucracy. The ultimate paper that gets pushed across the desk is money.
By the way, guys, if you guys want to support the channel, please go to www.patreon.com/NuanceBro to see more videos like this. Also, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell for future videos. So why are we out here today?
I think we're out here because things are going on in our country that are really wrong, and we're not willing to just sit back and let our country continue its legacy of being really cruel to families.
Sure, and what exactly is going on?
What's going on is that children are being separated from families. Trump recently passed an executive order to end that, but from my understanding, what's happening with that order is now he's saying let's detain families together. So now we're putting children in detention. So I'll let Laura speak a little too, since I know she's got things to say. But yeah.
Sure, so what do you feel like is the solution to this?
I think the solution is, I think one thing that's come up in the rallies today that I think is really excellent is to end private prisons and to stop kind of the privatization of separating families and sort of just the whole complex that makes it a money-earning endeavor to detain people.
We need to defund ICE. It's only existed for 15 years and we don't need it. And it's destructive.
So as far as the private situation, do you feel like that should be transferred to the government as far as the detaining facilities, or what do you think should be done specifically with this issue?
Well, I think children shouldn't be detained, so I think there shouldn't be a need for detainment in the first place. So I think that kind of, I don't think anyone should be doing the detaining, but I think a broader problem that we have in this country with issues like this and more broadly is that our prisons are private. Some of our prisons are private institutions, which incentivizes.
And even if they were public, too many people are in prison for things that they shouldn't be.
So that's what the Flores decision was actually about. It was about, not having children detained for over 20 days and stuff. So that was viewed as like a step in the right direction as far as that issue. But the problem was when, Trump said we're going to have the zero tolerance policy and we're going to prosecute families.
Around it.
Well, no, not getting around. It's when he said prosecute families, well then they get detained. But then because of the Flores decision, the children be separated. He reversed that, but I don't know how that. He's like asking the courts now for extensions on that so they can keep the families together in detention. So if you're saying don't detain the kids, what do you think should be done if you want to keep the families together? Just should we release all of them just into the country and do like a catch and release program?
That would be my inclination. I'll be the first to say it's not something I've researched heavily, but from what I do know, that seems like the most humane solution.
There are asylum seekers, particularly for the asylum seekers. I mean, they should be processed quickly and then allowed into our country.
So usually asylum seekers, they usually go through a legal port of entry before they ask for asylum, but these people who are being detained and then criminally prosecuted, it's because they crossed in illegally first, but then they ask for asylum later. So their asylum cases are still being processed, but because they broke the law in the first place, they're doing the prosecutions. Don't you think they should go through a legal port of entry if they're going to claim asylum?
I think that a lot of people who would be coming desperately from their country to ours are not really at liberty to be choosy about how they come in. And so I think if that's the situation, then we need to reform our process so that people who are really desperately in need of help have the ability to, come into our country, have, a safe, free life and avoid traumatizing themselves and their children in the process.
And of these asylum seekers, like what percentage do you think have legitimate asylum cases? Because obviously this happened on the Obama administration as well. And I think they rejected something like 87% of the asylum cases. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt. I don't know. I think the statistics show, and I haven't done a lot of research on this, but I believe the numbers show that we could accept a lot more people into our country without harming our economy, which is an argument people make a lot. And I don't see any reason not to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Sure. And how many people do you think the U.S. should be taking into the country? Because I think we take, I think through legal immigration already right now, we take about 1 million people a year in a country of 300 million people or so. So how many do you think the U.S. should take per year?
I don't know about the numbers, but my guess is that we could take in all of these people and still be perfectly fine, like all of these asylum seekers. I don't think people say that we have an obligation to protect our country and our country's economy, but we also have an international obligation. So even if it did cause some harm to our economy, which I don't think it would, I think we have moral obligations to allow people in, and I think our border policies are way too restrictive. If it were up to me, I don't know how far exactly in terms of numbers we should go, but a lot further in terms of, making our border policy less restrictive.
Do you think if we let in, like, let's say 20 million people, and, you know, these are generally low-skilled labor people. I mean, they don't really have, you know, they're not computer engineers or anything like that. So if you're letting in about 20 million people a year or something like that, do you think our economy can support that? And a lot of people, with the unemployment rate already being about 3.8%, wouldn't there be a lot of people without jobs? And when people don't have jobs and they can't provide for their families, that commit crime and things like that, because there's just no other option. You don't think poverty leads to crime?
I do think poverty leads to crime, but I mean, I don't think these people are the ones that are committing crimes. Like these people.
Well, if they're desperate and they can't provide for their family, what else would they do?
I mean, if you're saying that we shouldn't allow poor people in because they might commit crimes, I think that's the wrong way.
No, not just that, but I'm saying the numbers. If we're saying there shouldn't be borders and we just let people en masse and we don't have the infrastructure that can support that kind of...
I think for the most part, a lot of people who are coming here undocumented are asking for jobs and, you know, employed in jobs that we wouldn't, you know, people, even poor Americans wouldn't be anyway. I think there's to a certain extent it doesn't overlap.
But there's not an unlimited amount of jobs. I mean, the unemployment rate's already at 3.8%.
You can look at this. It's a controversial topic how letting more people in would affect our economy, and I think given the controversy, if it were very clear cut, we could have maybe a slightly different discussion. But given that it's so controversial, why not open our borders a little bit and then see what happens?
Well, did you hear what Bernie Sanders said about open borders?
What did he say?
He said that it's a Koch brothers policy, that this is what corporate America wants because bringing in cheap labor results in higher corporate profits and it hurts the American worker. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, for asylum seekers, I'm really not worried about that.
Well, they're not really. I mean, they're claiming asylum because, you know, it allows them to stay in the country for longer periods of time, and that's what they've been coached to say. But most of the asylum seekers, their cases are rejected.
You think they've been coached to say they're asylum seekers?
That's just true. I mean, that's not. No one really disputes that.
Has that been proven somewhere?
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, how would they know how to say that?
I mean, I'm sure they were told by lawyers that their situation was an asylum case. I don't really want to participate in this if you know, if we're not giving them the benefit of the doubt, and when people are asking for help, I think I'm about to.
Thank you. So why are we out here today?
So Trump and the policies of the Republican government have decided that at the border, instead of letting people in, we're going to put them into jails and separate them from their families. So right now there's thousands of kids who are separated from their families, don't know where their parents are, and are being detained. And even though the executive order said that they're going to stop separating the families, there are thousands of families that are still separated and don't know where each other are.
Sure.
So that the top priority is to get them reunited with their families.
So what do you think should be done? Like, what kind of policy should we put in place to fix this?
You know, first things first is people crossing the border should not be put into jails. That, of course, is something of contention. A lot of people disagree with that. I just think that is not a crime that should be punished by being put in a detention center or cages. You know, what would I do if I were in charge is I would let anyone in who needs asylum. We have a lot of space, and they're not hurting us. So.
I mean, would you have a vetting process to determine who qualifies for asylum or not? And how many of the people coming here right now do you think actually qualify for asylum?
You know, great question. Again, I'm not as educated as I could be on this topic. I would have a vetting process probably, but I think it would have to be a pretty soft entry to the United States. There's a reason that these people are leaving their country. It's not easy to make that journey, especially with kids. But if you're fleeing your country, there's a huge chance that you're doing it because you're suffering in your country. So,
I mean, what if I told you under the Obama administration, I think it was something like they rejected 87% of these asylum cases from people from South Central America?
Yeah, I don't agree with a lot of what Obama did, and that's one of them. We're so strict about our borders because we think that immigrants are costing us a lot of money and are making our country worse. We need to find a way to make it work, and we need to find a way that they can help contribute to society in a legal way.
What do you think about Bernie Sanders' comments about open borders, where he said that's a Koch brothers policy, that corporate America actually wants cheap illegal immigrant labor to come in because it drives up their corporate profits and it hurts American workers?
I think that a lot of people depend on immigrant workers and illegal work without even realizing it, and I think the large companies depend on them, and so it's a little bit of a catch-22 where they're saying we don't want any immigrants, but also how will their companies survive?
So we already taken, I think, about 1 million legal immigrants per year. How high should that number be if we're going to include people who are just coming in through the, through the southern border from Central America and all that? How many people do you think the United States could reasonably take in and not have it sort of, strain our infrastructure or cause big problems with, unemployment and crime?
Yeah, I think that there have to be regulations for people who come in. It's kind of like when you're making something illegal, then it's going to go out into the black market, right? So if you're going to legalize something, and then you can regulate it. So if you have people coming in, what is it that they're required to do? Maybe they have to do years of service to support the country, or maybe they have to, right now, if we have illegal immigrants, they're not paying taxes, right? So if we can make a way to support them in coming, they can find a way to have them contribute to society, because I'm sure most of them want to do that.
Sure. And if they don't meet those standards, would you deport them?
I don't know. I hope to elect politicians who are smart enough and kind enough to make those decisions.
Anything else you'd like to say?
Shout out to MLK Middle School in San Francisco. Thanks for giving me this sign idea.
Don't be douchey. Middle school kids came up with that?
Yeah, they're smarter than us.
Well, I hope not.
Okay, so Mr. Nuance, it shows on your shirt you have Democrat, Republican, Nuance. So are you trying to say that you're coming at this from a neutral perspective? Is that your attempt?
I'm coming at it from a nuanced perspective, so not a partisan perspective. I'm not like, oh, this is my ideology and I have to approach it from this, I'm holding to this, no matter, hell or high water, or whatever that term is. I don't come from it from that perspective. I just try to ask people questions no matter what side they're on, and I try to figure out why they believe what they believe.
And do you try to put none of your opinion in? You just try to get the opinions from everyone else?
Generally at events like this, yeah, I just try to ask people, like, what's your opinion? And I try to give, no matter what side they're on, I try to give, like, oh, well, here's the opposing view, or here's a challenging question. But I do have commentary videos where I kind of go into either what I believe or kind of, debunking some other type of thing. And there's no way you can avoid that, because if you're taking a side, I guess, but I don't really consider myself as part of any side.
Yeah, that makes sense. In your work so far, what have you learned?
I've learned that not everyone is, don't judge a book by its cover. Some people are more nuanced than they appear. And, even like one of the earlier interviews before, things might seem like they're going well in the beginning, but sometimes people are a little crazy and they might threaten you and threaten to take your property and harm you. So you have to always be careful and just have an open mind, talk to people, don't be so grounded in ideology. I think that's one of the big problems in America today is we all get on our super hyper partisan sides and we don't talk to each other. We just like to say, you're evil, you support this, you're a bad person, and we don't talk to anybody.
Right, so hence the Republicans blaming the Democrats blaming the Republicans, and nothing gets done.
We talk at each other and not to or with each other. And I think that's a problem.
I agree. It's quite nuanced.
Now give me back my mic. All right, guys, that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you liked it. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Support me on Patreon. Social media links are in the description box below. And thanks for tuning in for another episode of Nuance, bro.